Hello everyone, welcome to our Chinese culture class. I'm teacher Chang. Today we will talk about the Chinese gardens. The Chinese garden is a landscape garden style which has evolved over 3,000 years. It includes both the vast gardens of the Chinese emperors and the members of the imperial family, the more intimate gardens created by scholars, poets, former government officials, soldiers, and merchants, made for reflection and escape from the outside world. They create an idealized miniature landscape, which is meant to express the harmony that should exist between man and nature. Records of the 20th Conference of the UNESCO World Heritage Committee, describing classical Chinese garden design and the gardens of Suzhou, China. Have you ever been to Suzhou? Suzhou is one of my favorite cities. Gardens in that area are known for their skillful combination of landscapes. They use man-made structures, such as creeks, rocks, trees, plants, pavilions, platforms, terraces, and bridges. Together they create a poetic atmosphere, just like a painting that combines poems, calligraphy, and the scenery all in one. The rocks in the garden don't have to be huge to look meaningful as long as they are arranged in order. The same is true with the creeks. It's not the length of the creeks, but the turns and the curves which give the garden a feeling of liveliness. This is a manifestation of the Confucian belief of harmony between man and nature and the Taoist worship of nature. Okay, look at this one. Do you think they are beautiful? Indeed, bonsais have forced a different environment upon the plants. However, people like them for their philosophical implications, representing an interaction with the world through a pointed landscape. There used to be a saying that goes, "Three leaves and two flowers represent the world." In other words, the few pieces of leaves and the flowers are enough to make you feel the change in the weather, the earth, and the universe. That's the beauty of bonsais. The miniature gives people a feeling of closeness to nature. Okay, now let us look at the Chinese building characters. Unlike Greek architecture, which is an organic combination of blocks, Chinese traditional architecture emphasized an abstractedness and tone, and displays the rich variance and connotation of the tone with innumerable flowing lines. Large, solid walls not only function as a protective surrounding defense, they also embody tranquility, secluding the residents from the outside world. The thick, solid walls block noise from outside and keep the inside quiet. Okay, now we talk about the garden's history in China. The earliest recorded Chinese gardens were created in the valley of the Yellow River during the Shang dynasty. These gardens were large enclosed parks where the kings and nobles hunted game, or where fruit and vegetables were grown. Under the Han Dynasty, a new imperial capital was built at Chang'an. Chang'an is today's Xi'an, and Emperor Wu built a new imperial garden, which combined the features of botanical and zoological gardens, as well as the traditional hunting grounds. After the fall of the Han Dynasty, a long period of political instability began in China. Buddhism was introduced into China by Emperor Ming, and spread rapidly. During this period, many former government officials left the court and built gardens where they could escape the outside world and concentrate on nature and literature. The Tang Dynasty was considered the first golden age of the classical Chinese garden. Emperor Xuanzong built a magnificent imperial garden, the Garden of the Majestic Clear Lake, and lived there with his famous concubine, consort Yang. The Qing Dynasty was the last dynasty of China. The most famous gardens in China during this period were the Summer Palace and Old Summer Palace, we call Yuanmingyuan. Both gardens became symbols of luxury and refinement, and were widely described by European visitors. The Chinese gardens are filled with architectures, halls, pavilions, temples, galleries, bridges, kiosks, and towers, occupying a large part of the space. In addition to these larger halls and pavilions, the garden is filled with smaller pavilions. We call these pavilions ting, a lot of ting, which are designed for providing shelter from the sun or rain, for contemplating a scene, reciting a poem, taking advantage of a breeze, or simply resting. Pavilions may be located where the dawn can best be watched, where the moonlight shines on the water, where autumn foliage is best seen, where the rain can best be heard on the banana leaves, or where the wind whistles through the bamboo stalks. They are sometimes attached to the wall of another building or sometimes stood by themselves at viewpoints of the garden. By a pond or at the top of a hill, they often are open on three sides. Now look at the fake mountains, artificial mountains. We call 假山. 假 in Chinese means fake. 山 means mountain. The artificial mountain or rock garden is an integral element of Chinese classical gardens. The mountain peak was a symbol of virtue, stability, and endurance in Confucian philosophy. A mountain peak on an island was also a central part of the legend of the Isles of the Immortals, and thus became a central element in many classical gardens. Okay, wildflowers and trees. A pond or lake is the central element of a Chinese garden. The main buildings are usually placed beside it, and the pavilions surrounded the lake to see it from different points of view. The garden usually has a pond for lotus flowers, with a special pavilion for viewing them. There are usually goldfish in the pond, with pavilions over the water for viewing them. Flowers and trees along with water, rocks, and architecture are the fourth essential element of the Chinese garden. They represent nature in its most vivid form and contrast with the straight lines of the architecture and the permanence, sharp edges, and immobility of the rocks. They change continually with the seasons and provide both songs and aromas to please the visitor. Each flower and tree in the garden had its own symbolic meaning. The pine, bamboo, and the Chinese plum was considered the three friends of winter by the scholars who created classical gardens, prized for remaining green or blooming in winter. Taoism had a strong influence on the classical garden. After Han Dynasty, gardens were frequently constructed as retreats for government officials who had lost their posts or who wanted to escape the pressures and the corruption of court life in the capital. They chose to pursue the Taoist ideals to disengagement from worldly concerns. The Chinese classical gardens had a notable influence on the early Japanese garden. The influence of China first reached Japan through Korea before 600 AD. In 607 AD, the Japanese crown prince sent a diplomatic mission to the Chinese court, which began a cultural exchange lasting for centuries. Hundreds of Japanese scholars were sent to study the Chinese language, political system, and culture. The first European to describe a Chinese garden was the Venetian merchant and traveler Marco Polo, who visited Summer Palace, Kublai Khan at Kublai Khan at the Zhangjiu. The garden of Kublai Khan had a later effect on European culture. In 1797, it inspired the Romantic poem Kublai Khan by the English Romantic poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Okay, thank you very much. See you next time.